I think we've been looking at the pull requests first, if I'm correct. And I see this one from 3 days ago, so I don't know, do we want to start there?
I,
Or,
yeah, I'd recommend that. Now, one process suggestion I had it circulated in one of the emails we might want to talk about first is currently the project board has 3 columns, and if we added I was proposing to add a column between in progress and done, which is where we put the pull requests that were sort of ready for acceptance. Because when you just look at the list of pull requests, you can't always tell which ones are ready and which ones are not. I think, as I said in emails, I think both 38 and 31 are ready to approve. But it would just make life easier, particularly if we end up with a lot more of them. At least that's how some other projects we work on do it. And then we could, as Adam mentioned, run the meeting from this board that you're now showing, because it'd be obvious that, hey, we want to talk about, in this case, it'd be 38 and 31 if we're in that column. Just a suggestion.
I mean, I'm good with that.
I don't have any issue with it. Ask a different way. Are there any objections to that? Sorry, sir.
I'm gonna take that as a no.
Makes sense to me.
Golden.
What did you, what was the name you said?
I said ready with a question mark, READY question mark, but I don't actually care. It's more just to have it as a
Yeah, in review or something, whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as we know what it is.
Do I need to do anything here?
No, yeah, you just create the column, I think, yeah. And then you can pull it over one.
All right. So then I can pull over the 2 that we're gonna look at today, which are these 2, 38 and 41.
Yeah, and yeah, we can do that. Get ready to do it next time. It's just to make it a little easier, but you don't
see
have to necessarily
38.
make you do it in real time. I know when I'm running meetings, I hate when people watch me working with the screen.
Yeah, I don't think these are even set up yet in the project, that's why. Right?
Yeah, so now you can go ahead and click there and then click the underneath part, and or you might have to open it as the real issue. Yeah, there you go, and do that.
That one, and this one, we'll just get them both on the thing. All right. Do you want to look at 38 or 31 first?
38 FAQ. I think we might have to discuss the architecture a little bit, but FAQ should be pretty non-controversial. I'm proposing to add a section called frequently asked questions, and I populated it with a bunch of questions, some of which I put answers into. I'm not wedded to any of them. It's more just to get it going. I have been giving just the PACE project to various people and telling them, hey, they should be involved and care about it and stuff like that. And it's sometimes hard to, figure out what relates to what. So at least other websites frequently use sort of an FAQ to do that, because it's sort of easier than it is to write, documents and prepare briefs and all that kind of stuff. It's just, hey, someone's got a question, how does it relate to this? How does it relate to that? What is it? Etc. So, and if you want to actually display it, the easiest way to do it, is probably to, like you're doing. And then under docs, click on docs, and then click on FAQ. And then that's what's there. And there's a lot of TBDs, and there's a lot of just, little stuff thrown in there. It's mainly to get the work started so that then other people can do pull requests, answer what is collection with respect to PACE or whatever. And we can either accept it now if everyone's okay with it, or if anybody wants time to read through them. was mainly to try and get something out there so we could then, you know, make other pull requests to say, no, I don't agree with this sentence, or hey, put something in here or whatever.
Well, I
Vote so we
suppose,
get it in. Does anybody have anything against us just pushing it so people can continue to edit this page? This FAQ?
Let's go down a little more, please. Sorry. What does it say specifically about SBOM, if anything? Duncan.
I think I put it in there. Oh, it says how does SBOMs relate to PACE TBD. I didn't put anything in there yet.
Okay, perfect. That's fine. That's fine. I just remember there's an open issue about SBOM preferred,
Right.
kind of like
Yeah, I
this
definitely
sticks
wouldn't
preferred
get
or
it.
whatever. But yeah, okay. As long as it doesn't make any statement about that conclusion yet, because we haven't made it. So I have no objection to pushing.
All right.
I learned something from it already. I hadn't heard of Sarah before. So,
Well, somebody actually asked me that, and that's what prompted me to actually make the whole thing. So, because I hadn't heard of it either.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna merge it then.
All right.
Okay.
Now, one other thing, while you're on that page, yeah, go ahead and take the in review and move it to done.
Great.
Thank you.
Now the bigger one.
Right. Now, this is the one we've discussed each of the last 2 weeks, but we still were debating one particular topic, plus Adam wasn't here, and I know he was part of when we initiated the, hey, what do we want to include in here? So I wanted to make sure he was okay. I think Dave, and Duncan have agreed on, I'll call it the original way I worded it. Dave Lemire had proposed that maybe we were sending too many bits around in with one of the particular sets of colored letters and some of the pictures. But when looking at the alternatives, I think we've reached agreement that that's actually probably not a good thing security wise. But I will defer to Dave Kemp and Dave Lemire before. It really should get. Do you guys agree we're back to the original PR, or do we need to make changes?
yeah, I agree. I think there are security issues related to endpoints controlling the repository or sending commands to the repository.
Yeah, so what's now on the screen was an alternative that we've decided probably isn't a good idea.
Can you just so which one is the one that
Which one should I go to?
A little bit further
Yeah.
down. Oh, I see. This is the issues. You actually have to go to the actual, yeah, that one right there. Oop.
Wait, this one?
The two you're just switching between that one now showing is the proposal. An alternative, which was, I'll call it the dark background one, which you showed a second ago, was proposed, but we've now decided to not do that one.
Okay.
So we're back with basically the PR as written.
okay, hold on.
Just explaining the other one from this one without having to switch the other picture. The issue was basically let's use SBOM as an example. The SBOM in this particular case is going on the green number 2 from the component, you know, the device, the firewall, the whatever, up to the posture collection service, and then going down again to the posture attribute repository. In the alternative, and the question was, hey, in SBOM, and they're not huge, but they're not, you know, they're not tiny either. Are we sort of wasting bandwidth by doing that? Should we just have the component send it directly to the PAR? And I at least have security concerns with that because there's a small finite number, maybe only one, PCS and PAR, and there are millions of things to the left. So you don't really want to give all of the millions of things access to directly to your database. And that's sort of why you have the posture collection services to do that authorization and authentication.
So,
Go ahead.
sorry, I want to back up a second. So, if we're basing this on what we thought the original vision was going to be for what we were working on in IETF, there was far more intelligence in what you have labeled here as an integration bus. Right? So the idea would be exactly that we could support, for example, event-driven posture attribute collection, so that when a component posture changes, it just posts to the bus, to a topic, right? And then whatever's listening to that, whatever's authorized to listen to that, would field it. So that could be the repository or whatever, right? But I feel like we're moving back to this approach where we're supporting less and less the idea of event-driven architecture and more of this control thing. Like even in the wording for number 1, it says decision-making element, e.g. a SOAR. I don't think that's a thing. I think it's an overall capability by many things.
Right, but whichever one of them it is,
Okay.
something. Again, this particular example is assuming that you're following some sort of playbook and some event triggered something. Some event happened and something outside of the pace decided to tell the pace something. So that's what number 1 is that whatever, Kestrel says there's an attacker in here doing whatever. In the existing IDS use case that we have somewhere else in one of these documents that somebody else wrote, it sort of starts with, hey, an attacker got in, we should, sort of look at the environs around where he is to see what's going on. So that's sort of that was the one I was extending from this one, that something or other said something, and that prompted you to tell cell to occur. Now, I think it'd be a different use case, but it would look absolutely identical if the number 1 came from the bottom instead of from the top. Came from the component, came from the firewall or came from the, server that contained our payroll data or whatever. But something triggers, because this, again, particular use case is trying to get a new SBOM into the posture attribute repository or get new information, is what this particular one is. So I am assuming the decision to do that was done outside of PACE for at least this.
And so what intelligence is the PCS going to have that's any different than what the PAR has? In terms of whether or not it's going to accept what comes from all these different components on the left.
Well, so first of all,
assuming,
so again, sort of scrolling. Well, I won't scroll up. I'll describe it from here. So there are 2 architectures. One is where PCS, PES, and PAR are different boxes, different systems. Another where they're all just part of one monolithic PACE. So first of all, it doesn't make any difference when they're all part of one PACE. But the assumption is you'll have more than one of these things, and they might have to talk to each other. And so in this case, I'm assuming the functionality inside of PACE, there's a part of PACE that deals with the issue of who's allowed to do what. And that it's not the database itself. I assumed the PAR was the database itself. And again, I'm just doing it from what I read in the other boxes, in the documents that we had. So if there's a better way to do it, I'm perfectly game. I was just trying to get something in here so we could basically have these kind of discussions. But if there's a different, if basically if PCS and PR are always combined, so to speak, then great, we should just have one box. There were already 3 boxes in the architecture documents that were floating around. That's why I just put it in this section.
No, totally with you on that. Like and that was the intent, right? Is that like, so eventually we want to get to a point where a posture attribute repository only has to be queried, right? And the data
Right.
that it holds is fresh enough, so we don't have to go out and ping the entire enterprise all the time for
Right.
things we don't need because we've already got that information, right?
Yep.
So we wanted to be able to support a separate component. And you're right, it could be a monolith, but its interface would be separate, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, even in the monolith, you still have the green, blue, and whatever color I picked lines. They
Correct.
just all go to one box.
right. And if they're a monolith, you may not actually have, you know, the bus inside the monolith.
Yeah,
right?
two.
But
Yeah, three
in-
doesn't
in-
exist because it's all in one box.
right. So, all right. Well, I mean, this isn't like solidifying or finalizing anything, I think, right? It's just like
No,
expressing
this was
our
mainly-
ideas at this point. So,
No, Adam, in fact, that 2 meetings ago when we had the meeting, we started none of these pictures were in here. Well, the main just monolithic first individual was in here. And it prompted a bunch of questions about, yeah, but what are the use cases and what's it look like? And we talked about it throughout the meeting. So I just basically made pictures from talking about it. And then last meeting, based on the pictures, we had the discussion and everyone was like, no, wait, it shouldn't be, 1, 2, 3 there. It may 1, 2, 3, 4 there. It should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as was in the other picture, which we then discussed more offline, via the email list and came up with, no, we're probably back to the original. But yes, the whole purpose of the PR is just to have some place to stick this stuff, to have these discussions. Could even.
okay. Cool. No, that's great. That's fine. And thank you for tolerating and bearing with me on that. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
no problem. Yeah, and thinking about it, because we should explicitly discuss, the original question was, should the PAR be inside pace or outside pace? Is it a different thing and done by, not us, but by somebody else? Can we do it like with standard interfaces or something? And I believe the conclusion we've all reached is no, we have to define the blue line to get this.
Right. We define the blue line. And so, right. And this is the discussion about, like, the distinction I have is between an interface specification and the implementation. And I think PACE wants to provide both, but only specify the interface.
Right.
It doesn't care about how anything's actually implemented under the hood, but we do want to provide something.
Right.
So the proof of concept at least, or even, ideally something that people can use in production, right?
Right.
Would be good enough, right? So yeah, we've had that discussion, I think. Cool. So I don't have any objection to this particular PR at this point. It's really just supporting discussions.
Can I
And
share my
at that
screen
point,
for a
we need-
second?
I don't.
If I can find, oh, geez, this sucks. Here we go. So yeah, this is from SCAP. This goes back to whether the endpoints that are being evaluated are talking to the repository. And, originally we weren't even talking about standardizing that interface to the thing on the bottom. The thing that we're calling a PCS is a collector in SCAP v2. And the PCE here is an agent on the endpoint or an Nmap sniffer or something else. But we weren't even defining the interface between the endpoints to be evaluated and our PCS in the old one. So I think this is consistent with what we've been thinking before. The other question is, the repository is, if we expose the repository to the user application rather than having it just talk to this manager or the integration bus intelligence or whatever, we would, the question is how dumb or standard is that repository to user application interface? And So if that can be as commercial as possible, and what we define is just data structures for that repository rather than interfaces to that repository, that would be super. So. Did any of that come through?
Yeah, I mean, that's
All
basically
right.
getting into defining blue, which we need to get to. I wasn't trying to get that far in this picture.
Right. Yeah, but I was just saying, from the bottom left to the par, I don't think we were thinking about that interface before. And I agree, it's got security issues now. So I don't think we're changing direction.
So guys, I have a question. I was thinking, this is Money. Sorry, I didn't join last call where this was discussed. Can I share my thoughts?
Absolutely.
Sure. So I was thinking these lines and the way it's written, it's not sequential, right? At least I was not thinking that in my mind. To the earlier point of what is the value of PCS doing, simply echoing what the manager does, I was thinking PCS would be the main interface with which everything underneath gets done. And PCS is at liberty to orchestrate whatever mode of operation is to really collect the posture whenever it desires to do so, right? Maybe it's event driven, or maybe it's triggered by some event if it's not already available, right? So that is how I was thinking about it.
And that is one architecture. That's higher up in the, if you sort of scroll up in the document, Sarah, there's higher than that. Well, that one shows both types, but there's what, that one. There is, and I didn't know what to call it, and I'd welcome a better name. I called it the monolithic pace, where basically it's just one thing, and you talk to it, and I happen to make the 3 colored interfaces because, at least in some of the discussions, now if you could scroll a little bit higher, there was also discussion of, no, these functions could be basically separate, vendor 1 did one and vendor 2 did the other. And I think where it becomes more apparent is now, if you could scroll down 2 pictures, is in real life, I don't think we're going to get to the point where you have one pace system. You're going to have, maybe this one does SBOMs well, and this other one does, I don't know, situational awareness well, and this other one does, I don't know, temperatures well. I have no idea what all the inputs are going to be. There's going to be a lot of inputs into security posture. So you're going to have multiple of them, and it could be that they're all, like P1 and P2 are on the bottom. They're all basically monolithic. But from the customer viewpoint, it might be, yeah, well, I use this one mainly for its repository, and yet the evaluation really takes place in this other one. So it sort of looks like this one is really just a PES and this other one is just a PER. So whether implementation-wise you actually have it looking like this picture or not, I think functionally it will look like this picture. At least that is what I picked up from our discussions. So you don't have to, actually have them be different boxes. It might be they all do look like monoliths, but when you have a bunch of them and how you use them, particularly once we start getting into PES, the evaluation might take data from other than, for lack of a better term, its own repository.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And again, that's just how I understood what everyone else said. It's not like I'm inventing this stuff. I was just trying to get something on paper to talk from. So if I'm wrong, correct it.
Well, I like it. I think the multi-pace makes sense. I think your example of the PES taking data from more than one repository makes sense. So I think this is a good starting point.
No objection to that.
So then can I move this one forward?
I'd say we can move it forward. I mean, this is just my thought. We could probably move it forward because it's not like, it's for further discussion, right? It's not like we're saying this is final. So,
Yeah, it's not like we're publishing it or anything. It's more to get
Right.
something to now do issues
Right.
against and pull requests against and whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
I better start using JPEGs instead of PNGs because my PNGs look terrible on people with dark background screens.
JPEGs be any different?
Yeah, because PNGs support transparency and JPEGs don't.
Right. So you would want transparency, right?
No, that transparency is why
Oh,
it's really
yeah.
hard to follow my diagram because what's white on Duncan's pictures is mostly black on mine, and you lose track of where the boundaries are and whatnot.
Yeah. Be careful to make everything a mid-gray tone, not black or white.
Well, again, that's why he wants to pick the background. Then you can pick the background to go with the colors you picked.
Yeah.
I think for the other items that you asked for in the email prior to this meeting, I had already taken care of, so they moved to done. Did
I
we
noticed
need to-
that. Thank you.
Did we need to, do we want to cover anything in progress today?
I have one announcement to make whenever is appropriate. It could be at the end or whatever, but it's not actually on an issue, but it's more about an event.
the only question I have about the in progress ones are any of these, and this is just because I haven't been essentially present for the past couple of weeks. Are any of these actually something we should be able to move to in review, or are we still having open discussions on these?
A couple of them we've decided the answers on, but we haven't put the answers anywhere, so to speak. In other words, we need to make
Okay.
ours with actual
Yep.
text so they get recorded.
Or just answer it, right? Like if it's just an issue that needs an answer, and then we'll talk
Well, but-
about it somewhere. Yeah, I'm with you. I
I
get
mean,
it.
on the scope issues, we thought we probably should not just leave them buried in an issue that ends up in a pile of 100 done issues.
Yep.
We could do
Okay.
that, but we were thinking we probably should, and I think we agreed to make a scope like section or something, but I don't think anyone's actually done it yet.
Okay.
I know I haven't.
I still have questions on 28 asset inventory, and so, and what the meaning of scope is. So that one is still in progress rather than in
Oh, I thought
review.
we'd actually solved that. I thought we decided it was out of scope, but you're saying it might still be in.
Yeah, the question is, if you're not defining an interface, we know that we need asset inventory. We know that the PCS needs to talk to asset management. If we're not going to define the interface that PCS uses to talk to asset management, does that mean that it's in scope or out of scope? And I would think it's a don't care. That's how you implement your PCS. It has to talk to something, and we're not defining the interface. And that implies to me that it's inside that box because we're defining the red and blue and green for things that are outside the box.
What I thought we determined, and again, maybe we need to draw our pictures. I didn't have that on my pictures. We need an asset inventory box to define whether it's inside the asset inventory itself is inside PACE, or I thought what we agreed is the asset inventory itself is outside of PACE, but yes, we need to talk to it. Or well, and I thought we even determined whether we need to talk to it or these smart buses and SOARs or whatever it is that's outside of us figures it out and tells us what we need, and we do know how to ask it questions, I guess. But that again might be a function of the bus. But the issue, so do we need, where is the intelligence about correlating asset inventory with the attribute information that we have? Is that within scope is a good question. If it is within scope, we definitely need the interface. If it's out of scope, then we don't. But either way, the customer needs it somewhere. The issue I think we wanted to avoid was there are a bunch of asset inventory systems already. There are even a bunch of asset inventory standards already. There is not one to rule them all. And if there was, we could just say, go use it. But I don't think there is. And I'm not sure we're supposed to be picking it, but maybe we are. That's a good question. If asset inventory becomes part of, I'll say, the overall OCA, is PACE the place where we put it?
Right. Yep. And I mean, even if we're doing a prototype, we need to pick something. I mean, if there are 5 products and we picked one particular product for a demonstration, we, like you said, there isn't one interface to rule them all, but when we're creating our prototype, we need to use a particular interface. So we just need to figure out how to spec that in a diagram to achieve what we want in both a prototype and in a PACE specification.
Yeah, because I would assume, well, unless somebody knows of a great open source project we just pick and use for asset inventory, I would assume we're going to have to get into, Lycans or shifters, depending on if you're speaking sticks or speaking OpenC2, but we'll need some sort of box in between us and the outside world that converts from whatever we pick as our standard way to do something and whatever the 97 different ways to do asset inventory currently have as their interfaces.
So I had a link to one open source, not the 97, 96 others, but thinking about just getting some example asset data to play with, was my thought process there. And they've got 200 and some example assets in their database, some of which are meaningful and some others, like video cameras for cinematographers, aren't.
Well, that's good. Does anybody know, just because they go to any of the other meetings, if StickShifter or Kestrel have run, or Ontology maybe even, have run into the, hey, what should we use for asset inventory and OCA issue?
I do not.
Because we certainly don't want to go counter to something if one of them has done it. And I would sort of assume somebody else would have had to run into it before us, but maybe not. I'm a little worried about the asset part taking over the posture part. In other words, if we decide it's within our scope to decide what's the best asset management system for the cybersecurity world, that's a can of worms that will attract a lot of attention and won't necessarily move us forward quickly. But again, if someone's got Dave, you got this one, you say, hey, let's use this one for a prototype because that's what we're promoting. I mean, I'm fine with any of that. I would prefer to focus on the posture attribute part, not on the asset inventory interface part.
Yeah, definitely. The ontology folks are talking about asset identities and how in the cloud you want to use, GUIDs like an ARN, an Amazon resource number or name, rather than using something like an IP address or a MAC address or something like that. And so these older things have the traditional asset IDs that are bound to boxes. And I think we definitely want to be in the direction of using cloud type asset identifiers. And so this was a test case of how do you map one to the other. But yeah, I agree. We shouldn't be defining asset management.
So again, we've reached a, I think, conclusion that I think we're all agreeing, but it's not clear what's in each of our heads is the same thing. So I think we need to get black on white, or I guess in this case, white on black, text into something or other that we can, GitHub and PR against an issue against of, here's the nuance we forgot or whatever.
I will take this one.
Cool. Thank you.
Should I be assigning people or anything? Or no, or because this is already.
Yeah, you should assign that to Dave Kemp.
Yeah, the only thing I get done is action items, and a lot of things that I have action item for, I don't get done. But
He's like 6 down. There you go.
Okay. Let's see. How about any of these others?
I mean, I'm not prepared to talk about these other ones actually at this time, and technically we've got 5 minutes left. So I'd be in favor of ending a little early.
Actually, could I have the 5 minutes for the announcement I wanted to make?
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So, on June 2nd in Washington, DC at the AT&T Forum, AT&T is hosting the third cybersecurity automation workshop, which is basically a wacko creation of mine where we get together and try and get a bunch of this stuff to interoperate. We mentioned sort of in passing before in this meeting, but now that AT&T's gotten through all its red tape and can actually host us, we have finalized the location and the date. It will be a physical meeting, but it will also allow virtual participation. I'm setting up a website. I don't have it done yet, but at least some of the participants, myself included, and some of, at least it was discussed in the OpenC2 meeting, some of the OpenC2 participants are going to focus on the SBOM PACE example use cases and see what we can get of our various things to talk to each other to try and help work out those various color diagrams and work out, are we even talking about the right boxes and stuff like that, as well as, again, from an OpenC2 centric viewpoint, to work out the actual, commands like, hey, wait, we don't have an actual profile for this, or we don't have a command to do that, or we don't have this kind of target, whatever. And hopefully get all them worked out before June, so that in June we'd actually have stuff that actually talk to each other. So just wanted to announce that to people. It's the same mailing list that was used for the previous two, that I can go find a link and throw in the chat maybe. And if people are interested, hopefully there would be other players in the PACE space that would be interested in getting the different PACE applications talking to each other in this. And it's sort of a chance to put a stake in the ground and try and make stuff actually work. Has worked well in the past, so we're going to give it another try. And this, one of the previous ones was focused on a particular OpenC2 comply to connect use case. The different ones focused more on SBOMs in general, creating them in the first place. This one's going to be more focused on, hey, how do we use this SBOM data and actually make some of these decisions and decide to, put different firewall rules in because of whatever happened or whatever. So just thought I'd announce it so everyone knew about it. Let me go find the link, which I must have somewhere.
Cool. Thank you.
so I was just briefing our group here at NSA about that. In fact, that we had gotten a host and a date firmed up, and that's really lighting a fire. You know, June sounds like, oh, it's summer. We're only in March, but it's a blink of an eye, and we're going to have to, get serious about prototyping soon.
Just part of the reason I do those things to light those fires. Well, thank you for listening.
Of course.
Adam, I think you can stop recording then, and I think we can